Hello, and welcome back to What Now on the Threshold of Life, Death, and Grief. And here we are back in the studio with my friends and colleagues.
David Kennedy.
And Red Keating.
I'm Julie Brown, and it's just the three of us to talk about the most wonderful time of the year, or not. To talk about the holiday season. And, we're gathering to talk about, we might reference Christmas, but of course, recognizing that there are many holidays that occur at this time of year. But also, I think much of what we're going to discuss could really be applied to holidays throughout the year, special dates and anniversaries that can be challenging for those of us living with a life-threatening illness and the bereaved.
Well, and I think it's good for us to talk about both aspects of people who are living with a life-threatening and are coming up to perhaps their last holiday. And I think there's issues that we can identify around that side of things, as well as the grief side. And how do people navigate these holidays after someone who's been part of their life has died and now is not here? So I think one of the things that's good about our time together today is that, yes, I agree, Julie, this can be appropriated to holidays throughout the year and special days, but also to keep in mind that for people listening, we will be touching on both those sides of this challenge around holidays.
I'm aware that I think of the number of clients I've sat with where they're either receiving a diagnosis or newly bereaved. It's not uncommon, even in August or September, to hear people say, how are we going to get through Christmas this year, right? So it does weigh heavily on people. So maybe we just begin by just acknowledging that it often can feel like a bit of a countdown for people to the holiday season, the expectations that come with it, the traditions, the energy that it demands. And now, how do we integrate all of that with this new chapter in our life that is still unfolding? So maybe let's begin with talking about the palliative journey when the holidays are upcoming. What comes to mind for both of you?
Well, we just did that last year in our family. One of the things we did was, as we were heading toward the holiday season with my father, who wasn't well, we weren't sure if he was going to make it through the holiday season or even to the holiday season. So we sort of had Christmas in early November. So we celebrated Christmas early in a way, and this sort of comes after, of course, all the COVID Christmases that were sort of or I should say holidays that were not. And so we got together and we decorated the house. We got the tree out really early, and we celebrated Christmas in November in expectation that this may be a holiday season that he might not be around for. It ended up that he did survive through the holidays, but that allowed us to have two Christmases. I mean, what was the worst that could happen having Christmas early is that we got to have two Christmases, which was sort of nice when you think back about it, that it was his two last Christmases. Mm-hmm. And so I think in that regard, we kind of got flexible with the holiday and didn't sort of box it into a specific time.
I think that's really important, Red, too, because I have found in working with families that there's two things. One, a lot of anxiety builds up around, are we going to make it? Are we going to get there? Mm-hmm. But then added to that, sometimes we put a lot of pressure on that person to do that. So they feel, I can't let my family down. I've got to make it to Christmas. I've got to do that part of it. And it's an unrealistic pressure that we add to somebody who, really is struggling to know how much life I have. And so I think what you just did with your family is a wonderful way, not only to make sure that the celebration is there, but I think it lessens anxiety for everybody to say, okay, it's not this pressure to have to make it to a particular date, because I really do know that many of families I've dealt with have felt that pressure. And as you said, Julie, that starts way back in August and September as they think about the next 3 months.
So I guess our first thing we're highlighting, and we're going to say the same thing about grief too, is flexibility, is, kind of being malleable and flexible in the way that we do our planning, in the way that we think, maybe needing to not hold so tightly to the way we've always done things, and to go, this is a very different time that we're living through. So let's be adaptable with it. And also recognize that even as we make plans, of course, staying flexible, because things change. Things are always changing.
And they do. And I think that's another good reason for families, as we think about this, to really start by having good conversation and not to be afraid to bring this up with the person who is palliative. And I think the focus, personally, I have always encouraged families to say, while you have needs in this time, and that's true, what does the person who's palliative need? What is their need as they celebrate this last holiday? What is it that they feel is most important for them? And allow that to be present, rather than, this is what I need to have happen, or this is what I want to have happen. I really do encourage the focus to be on that person and the communication around the family.
And recognizing we're often in real energy conservation mode at this point, both for the person who's ill and the family. And we just might not have the energy to follow through on these things. I think I said this in a previous episode. No, my father's last Christmas, we looked back on it later and we thought, well, why didn't we really do that up? Like, we knew he wasn't well. Why didn't we push harder? Why didn't we create more memories? Well, the answer is simple, is like, we didn't have the energy. We were worried and stressed and tired and scared, and we did the best that we could.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that, like, being kind with ourselves about the season that we're in, the season of, a lot is being asked of us.
And the pressure of expectation too. Like, as the caregiver, you may be tired, but so is the individual, right? And so when you're talking about that flexibility, Julie, that ability to say, dad or mom, whoever it might be, maybe it's time for a nap. Maybe Christmas or the holiday day is broken up so that the person participates in the parts that were important to them, but is allowed to then go sleep or go have a rest, because it's exhausting for everyone. And we all know, even just on a Christmas where this is not an issue, it's an exhausting time of year. Preparing for holidays, shopping, food, and family, all the comings together and the expectations that everybody participates. It's exhausting when these issues and these emotions aren't as raw as they are at a time like this. So, it's allowing everybody that space to be where they're at.
Have either of you, can you recall anything specific around unique things that were done, proposed by somebody knowing that this was their last holiday? I'm just curious to think about, what are some things that are important to people, I wonder. I thought of that myself. If this is my last Christmas, what would be important to me?
Do you want to share? You have a smile on your face.
Well,
David, so
you just turned that around because I just asked that question.
I'll save you both. I remember this one individual was a grandmother, and she was unable to do her own shopping. So of course that came onto the shoulders of her children, because she was absolutely desperate to make sure that her grandchildren got things from her, and they knew that they were from her, but she couldn't do the shopping. And so her own kids went out and made sure that got what she wanted. She said, I want these kinds of things for the kids, and I want, but she was unable to do it for herself. And so everybody sort of pulled together, because that was the important thing this Christmas. She wanted to have those gifts known that they were from her, and that there was a lot of love and thought behind them. And these were going to be the last things that she was going to be able to give her grandchildren. And the kids were wonderful, and they went out and made sure that they got everything. And they weren't big, but it was just sort of that sense that this was special to her, and she needed to give things to her grandchildren on her last Christmas, but she couldn't do her own shopping.
I'm thinking of one family I know who had lots of family traditions, lots of family around town that they normally kind of went house hopping to, and they just gave themselves permission to cancel all of that. And what the person really wanted who was dying was, I just want my family to stay home and we're going to watch movies today. And we're not even necessarily going to watch Christmas movies, but we might do that too. And we're going to they bought a bunch of like M&M food, and that's what we're going to do, because what they really wanted was quiet time together in just their little unit and really wanted to protect that time. And that meant saying no to a bunch of other things. And that felt right for them.
I'm glad to hear that from both of you, because I think that one of the things as we come to the end of life, that we know that the focus shifts from things and material things to relationships. And if there's been good relationships in family, I think that then becomes really important, more important than the things that we get for ourselves. I think read that's a great story of grandma wanting a memory, having that last piece. And I think that's a relational piece too, because it will connect the grandkids with her. I remember a video we used to show in volunteer training. It was called The First Snowfall. And it was about a woman who was dying. And her last wish was she wanted to live long enough to have a sleigh ride with horses. They lived on a farm, and that was their tradition every year. And the whole idea was that everything else around the holiday wasn't what is important around this last ride, that with her family, her husband and their daughter and children. And that relational piece was the most important. And that's what stays with the family too, in those holidays, is that relational piece. What do we do? How do we do that? So paying attention to those rather than just, what do we get? What do we get them for Christmas when we know they're not going to be here long? Let's talk about relational things. Let's talk about the things that are of the heart rather than of the pocketbook.
I think that's where answering the question, I end a lot of my sessions with people who are living with life-threatening illness is like, what feels really important right now on this day right now? Because that just keeps orienting us to the present moment, which is all that we have. And like, in other words, are we prioritizing what our value system is in this moment? And I think back to your earlier comment, David, about asking the person who's dying, asking the people around, and just asking, like, what feels most important for this holiday season? And the answer to that really should become the guideposts to your decision making, right? And if there's a pull or a tradition or expectations from somebody else or even within ourselves pulling us away from those guideposts, then the answer should probably be no, or not right now, or we're putting that on pause. And making sure, because we are in energy conservation mode, making sure that those are our guideposts to our decision making.
And that's why I think somebody needs to be a gatekeeper. Somebody needs to be sure that to guard that, because you're right, Julie. Many people will want their agendas. And so I think the core family need to understand that we have to be gatekeepers, and it's okay to say no to people, even visiting. Like, other people may want to come, but this is a time for just our family. And it seems like it's harsh, but if that's important to the person who's dying and their family, then it's okay for them to be that gatekeeper and to say no to others.
The thing I'm hearing is that it doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be big. The theme running through the comments I'm hearing is it's simple. It's simple. It's those relational things and the ability to say, this Christmas is different, and that's okay. And so you ask people what they want, 9 times out of 10, it's something relatively simple and doable. So when people are out there thinking, why you're doing a podcast about the holidays, is that it's not, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be flashy. It's usually simple, small, important things that don't take, like you, Julie, you talk about energy conservation, that in the end doesn't take a lot of energy to watch a movie together, but how important that is when we look back.
So let's talk about what if this is, I was going to say like our first holiday season without someone, but really they're just hard for a long time. And even when they're even not so hard anymore, there's still waves that come through of grief. So let's just turn ourselves towards that conversation.
And I think there's a piece of that's the same as my father used to say, it's the same thing, only different. Mm-hmm. But I encourage families coming up to the first holiday, or again, second, third, whatever, have communication, sit down, ask each other, what do you need this holiday? What's important for you this holiday? Now, if you've got 5 people or 6 people in that circle, there may be 3 or 4 different answers to that. And I think in allowing people to do what they need to do, or find a way to accommodate each other and allow people to do what they need to do without judgment, is a sign of a healthy family going into this. So I think it begins the same way, by having that conversation, and to each person in that circle, allowing them to be honest about what they need, and then finding a way to accommodate that.
Again, I think, like you say, same thing, different. It's that same sense of flexibility as you were talking there. I'm thinking, sometimes it's one person takes on the responsibility for ensuring a holiday festivities happen, right? And if you happen to be that core grieving person, and you have traditionally always done a big dinner with all the family, maybe this year it's a little different. Maybe everybody helps, it's more potluck. Or maybe we just have just a small dinner, or we order in because we just don't have the energy to muster up what it takes to put on something larger for the family. And that you can adjust and accommodate different types of traditions. And I think, Julie, you said earlier that if you hold tight onto those traditions, because you think if we don't do it this way, it's the way we've always done it, and it's the way Christmases have always been, but not like this is a very different Christmas. This is, if it's the first one, this is not the same Christmas. This is not Christmas as it has always been. And so maybe it's okay that then the traditions, I keep saying Christmas, but I do mean holidays, the traditions that we put around that, maybe they're going to be a little bit different too, and that's going to be okay. Maybe those will come back. The traditions will grow back in, but traditions can change. And this is a Christmas or a holiday like no other if it's within the first year. And so as a result, it's okay that that celebration and how we celebrate is a little bit different.
I'm thinking about how many women I have spoken with over the years who have lost their husband, and they are the keeper of the traditions and the maker of the big meal, and how what we're saying makes so much sense, and they know it. But the idea of saying, no, I can't do it, or I need help, feels excruciatingly hard to them, right? And so there's an obstacle often, and I just want to acknowledge this. There's this often like invisible obstacle, because rationally this just sounds so clear, right? It makes so much sense. Of course you might need more help, or of course we might give it up. And it can feel so hard to be the person saying, I can't do it, or I need help. It's hard for us. We really, we've referenced this in so many of our episodes. It makes us feel vulnerable. It makes us feel weak. It makes us feel like there's something wrong with us, and all of that, like in, harsh self-talk that we have to say, I just can't do it. And so I just, I don't have like easy answers to that, although I just want to acknowledge that there's often a real wrestling that happens inside with people between this is what I need to do, but wow, that's just hard for me to accept that that's what I need this year.
And Julie, one of the things I have encountered with that situation, and I agree with you. So using that scenario, that's where I hear a lot of women say, we're going to go away this Christmas. So escaping for a holiday, just going away for a few days or even a week and if there's kids, taking them with you. It's a way of kind of getting away from that pressure to have to do those things there. I say to them, again, I encourage them that if that's what they choose, it can be fine, as long as you don't think that you won't experience grief.
That's right.
You'll still feel it, but sometimes a change of location might help in the situation you just described. I've witnessed that a lot, where that's one of their options, to say, okay, this year I just am going to go away.
So in other words, what we're saying is the going away may alleviate some of the pressures that we feel, the obligations, the heaviness, the fatigue of even just the thought of doing it or of saying no. But of course, it's not going to change the grief.
Right.
And of course, the grief is going to surface. So, you can be sitting in Aruba and the grief is still going to be there, but maybe, you not having to cook the turkey dinner isn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's value in that.
I think that probably maybe some of the motivation for that is a sense that if I can't do it, I've failed somehow, that I'm weak, that I should be able to do this. And I always go back to the book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And in that book, the boy says, "What's the bravest thing you've ever said?" And he asks that of the horse. And the horse says, "Help." Because asking for help isn't giving up, said the horse. It's refusing to give up. But I think when we feel that we're that vulnerable and we don't have what we usually have, and we can't muster up that energy and that strength that we take on as our identity, I am the keeper of the holiday, that sometimes we see ourselves as failures. And it isn't failure at all to ask for help or to say we need to do things a little different this year. It means I'm still going to get through this, but I can't do it the same way, and I just need your help to do that. I'm not giving up. I'm doing the exact opposite. I'm getting through.
Of course, it's a challenge when, in your scenario, Julie, if the husband has died and the wife, well, or either parent, where there's young children, and the pressure we feel to make it normal for them. But we have to realize it's not normal for them. We cannot create a normal any longer. So this is a new normal. And I think allowing ourselves, as you said, Red, allowing ourselves permission to say, I need help with this, or I need to change this. I can't do it the way I did it, but I still need to include some things and make it fun for the kids. So there's a lot of dynamics going on, and oh my gosh, there's no one fix for everything, is there?
Yeah. And as we talked about in our episode on the grieving brain, it is adjusting to the absence. And we adjust to the absence by living through feeling the absence.
That's right. It's a land that we must continue to travel through. We don't get a choice in that. Yeah. So on that note, I just want to say that let's make sure we say their name. We talk about them if we want to talk about them. Remember that there may be times where we even forget about them for a moment and we might enjoy ourselves, and that's good too. But the moments when the waves come crashing in and the grief really surfaces, that we just allow ourselves to be messy if we feel messy, or if we feel, really kind of capsized by that particular wave. That's just part of the grieving process. The other thing I want to say is sometimes I find that people find the anticipation of the holidays harder than the actual holidays. So we spend so much time, I think, in my practice talking about these big dates, like the anniversary, the birthday, the holiday season, the whatever feels really significant for that person, the bereaved person. And then the day comes, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes there's relief because they've made it. Okay. And they wake up and they go, okay, I'm going to get through this day. But it was the living in the days and the countdown to that day. So I just also want to say that too, that sometimes it's not the actual holiday, it's the approach to the holiday.
And I agree. I've heard that so many times, Julie, and I've said that about the anticipation. The one thing I would like to just contribute here would be, and you alluded to that, is that grief waves come. We don't know when all the time. It can just
We
come.
don't.
And so I really encourage people at the first holiday, just be careful around the commitments you make for yourself, because you may not, when the day comes, you may not feel like it. So an example, and I think we talked about this last podcast on the holidays, but I would always encourage people, if their partner had died, they would get invitations for Christmas. And I would always encourage them. I'd say, it's helpful for you if you can say to them, thank you. Is it okay if I let you know the day of, if I'm able to attend? And if that's okay with you, then I'll say yes. And then the day of, I'll let you know my final answer. If you need an answer now and you would not be happy with me backing out at last minute, then I'll probably decline, because I never know. And I think, again, coming back to what you said, Red, the pressure that we put on ourselves, giving people permission to say, this is the reality of it. I don't know whether I'll be able to come. And even if I do come, I don't know how long I'll be able to stay. So if you are okay with all of that, then that's a good friend. That's a good invitation, because you may need to go out and you might have a great time.
I also think it's important to find ways to honor your grief in the holiday season. I know many funeral homes, churches, other places may offer a holiday service. I know my family and I, we went to one the first year that we were without my father. And that was really helpful. Just to, David, you spoke at that and told a lovely story. And what that did for us was converge the two. Yes, the holidays are here. And yes, there's loss here. And in this space for this hour, as all these people gather, nobody's trying to pretend it's otherwise. And it's just like a real honoring of that. And if you're not somebody who wants to do something like that, I think of how at hospice we've done doves where we've hung them on the fence or on the tree and we say in honor of. That's very meaningful. I've actually hung those up for other people, and I take pictures with my camera and say, I hung this in honor of your father or this person. And that feels really meaningful for people. It's like this visual representation of they are not forgotten, and my grief is not forgotten. So you may look for ways or make a donation to a charity or do something that just feels meaningful, that honors your grief and honors the person you've lost.
Wow. Just to come off a couple of things that have been said, I think, Julie, you're alluding back to something you said. It's to say their name. I would say, bring them forward. This individual was an important part of holidays past, right? And when we say their names and we talk about them, we bring them forward into the present. And I always say, we become the story keepers of those people who have gone before us, and we keep them alive and we keep their spirit alive by bringing their stories forward. And so that then includes them in the holiday season in a different way, but they're still there, and that honors them. And so tell the stories, because if you cry over the holiday season, it doesn't wreck the holiday season. It just means you've had a moment of sadness and you've acknowledged that, but the season still continues, right? And you'll still step back into it. And just give yourself that leeway and that permission to have the full range of the feelings that you're having during this season, because really the holidays do put that pressure on, because you're going to have this same range of feelings outside the parameters of any holiday season, right? And they're going to show up again at other important times in the year. And so I think it's really valuable to bring them forward by saying their name, talking about them, telling their stories. 9 times out of 10, it ends up with laughter as much as it does tears, right?
I can remember one of our first Christmases and Thanksgiving. We put a little plate out to signify my father's place setting. We put a bunch of turnip on the plate because for years, the only reason we ever really cooked turnip at these big turkey meals was for him. So the turnip was still there, and we're like, "Hey, this is for you, Dad." And And it was just like this visual representation of like, yeah, he's the guy who ate the turnip and he's still with us. Because he's imprinted on us.
You brought him forward.
Yeah. So final thoughts as we wrap up this holiday episode.
I'm glad, Red, you referenced the brain piece that we did the podcast on too, because I think the holidays is a remapping time. There are no shortcuts. Like all of life, the best way to deal with it, although we feel like hiding, we feel like running away, I think the reality is confronting it in a way that allows us to make it through and survive. And that's what I encourage people the first time. You survive. Do what you need to do to survive. And then, gradually we'll work this through. I just want to encourage our listeners. It's not easy. Nobody is saying it is. However, I think conversation with those that are important to you, letting your needs be known, finding a way to accommodate other people through this journey too, is how we find our way.
Red, any last thoughts from you?
I'll let David have those last thoughts. I think that was a pretty good wrap up in terms of that. Just, we get through by support. We get through by the help and love of others. And so even though it might feel like you're not pulling your weight, that's okay. Let some other people pull the plow, and that will pull you through and help you survive.
And I think my last thought would just be to reiterate, be kind to ourselves. Be gentle with ourselves. Grief is very hard work. Physically, emotionally, and all cognitively. When we can invite kindness in towards ourselves, what is the kindest thing I can do for myself in this moment? How can I bring kindness to this decision that I need to make right now, or to how I approach this event, or that sort of thing? Okay, so we'll send our blessings out to all of those who, if you're listening to this episode, it's probably because maybe a hard time of year for you. So we send our blessings and our wishes of kindness to you.
Thank you for listening to What Now? On the Threshold of Life, Death, and Grief. What Now? Is produced in partnership with Hospice Peterborough, dedicated to providing compassionate care and support to individuals and families facing life-limiting illness and loss. What Now? Is recorded at Thin Spaces Studio in Peterborough, Ontario. Special thanks to Paradise Garage for providing the music. Technical support is by Sean Heichert, and audio engineering by Kevin Fleming. More episodes of What Now? Are available for free on most major podcast platforms. If you found value in our conversations, please support us by following the show, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with your friends and loved ones. If you'd like to support the essential work of Hospice Peterborough, please consider visiting hospicepeterborough.org/donate. Your contribution helps us continue to provide vital care and support. Until next time, may you find peace and comfort on your journey.